is the Diary of a Lady Band Director podcast, brought to you by the Passion Is Network.
It's still faint. It's kind of distorted.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Give me one quick second. I am having my personal technical difficulties.
Hey everybody, what's going on? I know that my screen right now is showing it as Krystal, but it's not Krystal, it's me. while she's fixing her technical difficulties, let's go ahead and just kind of introduce everybody around the room. I know we know who Lauren and Cybil is because they're always part of the show. But let's just get an introduction, and while that's going on, that'll give Krystal enough time to get herself straight. So we can start from the right with Dr. Brock.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Tamisha Price Brock, a former music educator as of December 16th, but I'm a full-time educational consultant and professional development specialist. I'm the owner and chief executive officer of Prodigious Music Concepts and the HBC Recruitment Center here in Las Vegas, Nevada.
Awesome. And Stephanie Lassiter.
Hello, I'm Stephanie Lassiter. I am a senior vocal performance major, former music educator on the Central University.
All right, cool. And Jeremiah, Roselle, did I say it right?
Yeah. What's going on, everybody? Jeremiah Roselle. I am a music educator currently working in Granville County Schools for JF Webb High School. This is year 5. Graduate from Norfolk State University.
All right. So first thing I want to say is, behold the green and gold, because I know Dr. Brock came out of Norfolk, and then now I'm finding out Jeremiah came out, and I know Cybil very well. So it's good to always have Spartans everywhere. So yeah, it's super dope to be able to have you guys in the room. I see Krystal backstage, so I'm gonna try to hand it over to her. Make sure and let's make sure that her. Well, I guess she left again. So we're gonna wait again. But real quick, just for me, well, first of all, Lauren and Cybil, what's up? It's been a while since I've seen Cybil on the screen. She's doing the professor duties now, so I know that's taken a lot away, and but we definitely support you, and we're glad that you have gone on to that next level. So that's super dope. But I do want to be able to ask this question really quick before Krystal comes on and she takes over. Dr. Brock, I didn't know, former music educator. This is news to me.
Yes.
So
yes.
Yeah, that's news. What pulled you out of education?
This little one right here, taking care of him full time and then wanting to run my companies full time. So I'm still a music educator. I'm just not tied down to a school system. I kind of work for myself and do what I want to consult with whoever I want. So I consult with multiple HBCUs and multiple school systems across the country.
Absolutely. And I applaud that. I'm going to be honest. For me, that was one of the reasons why I stepped away from the classroom. For me, having 2 kids, and I just realized one day that I was spending more time with other people's kids than my own kids, and so that was one of the reasons why I decided to step away. But I don't ever consider myself not a music educator. When I meet people, I always say I'm a music educator, and that never changes. So
indeed, I agree. I agree.
Absolutely. All right, let's see if we can bring Krystal in, and hopefully all the ins and outs are together. Let's see.
Let us pray.
Yes. All right. Well,
I'm
out of the way, Krystal.
Yeah. So forgive me. I'm on my phone, so please don't text me because I will get bumped out. I am in the sticks. If those of you don't know, I am from a little town called Accokeek, Maryland, and if you never heard of it, that's because it is a blip on the map. So there ain't no signals down this daddy. And see, that's the only time I use it. Don't judge me, Lauren. I'm in the basement. My little brother changed the Wi-Fi password. I was like, why would you do something like that? So I'm here. First of all, thanks y'all for sticking with us, sister. 27 episodes. Never would have made it without you. So one, I think this is a topic that I've been toying around with. And shout out to Professor Cybil Haskins for bringing this to the front. I was going to do a little later, but February is kind of pivotal for music education majors. It's a pivotal time for Dr. Tamisha Price Brock and her business. And please make sure you put in the chat and YouTube, Dr. Brock, make sure you share, your business, because we for supporting Black businesses, for supporting Black woman businesses and Black man businesses and Black whoever businesses. And so this is a very important ministry, I feel, to our success as music educators and creating open spaces for us to be able to not just survive, thrive. And Dr. Brock, shout out to you. You're definitely doing exactly that. So we're going to start this out. I got to kind of hit that, that I'll hit the little, the list, whatever. But this episode is called Let's Talk About Praxis 2. Now, we're not just going to talk about Praxis 2, play on words. We're going to talk about all the teacher certification examinations and how it affects us, the music educators, the music professors. Me and Cybil, we wearing that hat. Dr. Brock has worn that hat. I see we have some special guests, some students or ones who have recently taken the test. So your input is valuable tonight because you're speaking to your peer group and you're speaking to the educators that helped you get to where you are. And if we're honest, sometimes maybe not so much of a good job sometimes getting us where we need to be. We're going to be real open and honest at this point, okay? Because we can't fix a problem if we're going to kind of sweep it under the rug, like that uncle that stay in the room. We're not doing that. We're not sliding food under the door. If you hear that, that's my dog too, my family's dog. All right, so the first question is, what are the test requirements for certification? And how do they differ from region, state, or local districts? And I have to hand this to you, Dr. Brock, because you are the expert in this field. I used to do tutoring on Praxis 2, and I was doing real good at it, but this is your business. So let us know, what is this all about and how does it change from those different regions?
Indeed. Many will give a basic skills test, but we're starting to get away from that. It used to be called the Praxis Core. Some people call it the Praxis Case, which assesses your general skills in reading, math, and writing. However, districts and states have come up with waivers. If you come out of high school with a successful score on the SAT or ACT, you can receive a waiver to be exempt from taking those exams. And some states are doing away with the basic skills requirement, or they have substitute requirements. So for this conversation, we'll focus on the Praxis 2, which does not change, or the subject area test does not change for requirements for certification. Of course, the most common across the nation are the Praxis series assessments, created by the Educational Testing Service, and they represent majority of the states in the continental U.S. as far as requirements for certification. Additionally, you have two additional companies. You have the Pearson Testing Service, which houses tests such as the Texas, the Florida test, and some of the other state tests. And then you have the National Evaluation Systems, I believe that's the name of it, that houses the rest of the tests across the country. I always tell people, and I've seen this, you have to know what's on the test, but looking at my experience taking these exams, even though the name is different, is wearing a different dress, it's all the same type of test. It all assesses the same content. It may just put it in different categories and give it different titles, but if you study for one, you can study for all of them. And that's what I stress to people. The biggest difference comes with the passing score requirement. You have some as low as 138 to pass, which is Guam and a few other areas. It used to be the state of Mississippi. Hawaii is still at 138, 139. And then you have some who jump the gamut and require a 161 to pass, much like DC, Louisiana, Alabama, not Louisiana, but Alabama, Mississippi, and places like that. And then, of course, you have the exam that comes with the constructive response, such as in Maryland, they require a 162 to pass. So it's a bunch of different tests out here. There have been many complaints over the years about test biasness. For those of you who are aged enough and you're listening to this podcast, you may remember the NTE, which was the original teacher test that was around for years. And it was a lot of racial bias associated with that exam. So they did away with it in the early 2000s or late 90s to come up with the Praxis series assessments. And it's undergone several changes since then. But nevertheless, you must pass these exams in order to be fully certified and to maintain your status as a music educator. There are provisional programs, but ultimately all roads lead to having to pass one of these types of certifications to achieve longevity as a licensed educator.
So it's real important for people to know, like, is one thing you pointed out is the score requirements per state. Mm-hmm. Because all states aren't created equal with these certification tests, especially when it comes to Praxis. I live in Maryland. Lauren lives in Maryland.
Mhm.
It is one of the hardest and highest scores required. So if you're thinking about relocating to Maryland, that score that might be in one state, it ain't gonna cut it in another state. And then can you speak to reciprocity of certification? Because that's something that's important for people who are trying to figure out where they're going to teach. And you pass in one state, don't always pass in another state.
Of course. And that leads into, before I get into that, it leads into not only the students knowing about the testing requirements, the score requirements, but professors too, because we often forget, especially in higher ed, that not everyone that's in your classroom is from your state, and they may not want to stay there when they graduate. They may want to go back home, or they may want to spread their wings and go someplace else. So the professors also have to be well versed on these passing requirements in other states and reciprocity. For many years, many of the states would accept reciprocity, meaning if you are fully licensed in one state, you can easily transfer your license as long as it's current to the state that you're going to. There are some states that have some resistance. If you've passed Praxis, they kind of want you to pass their exam. They're kind of in their own lane. And Georgia is one of those states that kind of pushes back against reciprocity. But if you have been licensed and you have so many years of experience, you can still fight that. And that's something that I help advocate for as well. But the key to it is you must be fully licensed. So let's say you pass your exams in your state. I always recommend that you go ahead and get the license in that state, even if you don't want to stay there. That way you have a little bit more buying power when you're trying to transfer to another state. So you want to show that you've been fully licensed somewhere. And if you can afford to if you can afford to still teach for at least a year in the state you've been licensed in, then that's always a good thing as well, to have some experience. But reciprocity, yes, once you pass the exam, you can transfer your license to another state and they will accept it as a substitute equivalent. I will also say too, keep your license current and make sure that you're staying up to date on what those states are requiring. They may require additional exams on top of that, such as the PLT exam.
Thank you for that. And I have put in the chat on YouTube a link for the Praxis score requirements by state and content area. Just go ahead and get that information. These are good nuggets. If you are a band director, even if on the high school level, it matters for us too. It matters for the general music educator. This matters, not just collegiate. We kind of own all of this in every stage. I have some questions for some of our panel. If you can just introduce yourself, say what school you went to or attended undergrad, or if you're still in undergrad, and of course, if you have taken the teacher certification test, whether it is the Praxis or another one, what state you took it in. And if you feel like you want to share, you've passed it. And Cybil has some guests here. So I think I'm going to let the guests go first. Jeremiah, introduce yourself.
What's going on, everybody? Jeremiah Roselle. I am a music educator in North Carolina in Granville County at JF Webb High School. I graduated Norfolk State University in spring 2018. So I've been teaching for about 5 years now. First 2 years were at a charter school in Durham, and then I'm now here in public school. So, yeah. I'm sorry. You said when we passed the test?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And which test you actually had to take?
So I had to take I'm from Virginia. Like I said, graduated from Norfolk State. So Virginia requires the VCLA, which is like a reading test, Praxis Core, and then Praxis II. So when it was time for me to graduate and kind of get my ducks in order, I had to take the VCLA, which I failed. And I had to take the Praxis Core, which weirdly enough, I did a phenomenal on, because I did the Praxis Core reading, writing, and math. I did phenomenal on the Praxis reading and writing. And then I failed the math because math was never my strong suit. So, and then I had to take the Praxis II, and I failed that a few times while I was in school. I failed it enough that I had to switch my majors, because I'm sure it's like this at other universities. When you're an education major, you can't get admitted into that education program without passing that test. And so many of my peers and guys and girls I was in the band with, were in school 4 or 5, sometimes 6 years, and couldn't pass that test. And so they end up dropping out of school. But grace of God, I was able to easily switch over to music media to get me out of school. And when I got to that charter school, obviously charter schools, some charter schools don't require you to be fully licensed. So I was able to teach and kind of get my student teaching experience there. And I was still taking the test. I failed it, I think, twice while I was at that school. But they were pushing me to get the it was like lateral entry license.
Mm-hmm.
They were pushing me to get that, so I had to get that, right? So that kind of put me on the clock, which added more anxiety to me taking the test. And with the lateral entry, I was able to move to the public school that I was at and took the test. I've been here 3 years. I think I've taken it 3 times. And the third time I passed it, and the third time was like in November. So I've had quite a battle. Yeah, but passed now, and that's the Praxis II test, the music Praxis. So good now and all squared away.
Well, first of all, Jeremiah, thank you for sticking to it. I mean, because you said something really important in your story is that you did not pass it several times, and you changed your major so you could get out of school, but you came back to it. And and maybe Dr. Brock knows the statistics on this, but I always wonder how many Black and brown people, because I'm gonna speak for us on Black History Month, how many of us have dropped out, how many of us have changed our major, even though our passion, we really want to do this, and we change our major because school is expensive and the tests are expensive.
Yes.
Don't nobody want to be passing that over and over again.
Indeed,
So,
it's dismal. It is dismal and studies are showing now that the achievement gap is widening yet again. And COVID has further exacerbated that problem, made it even worse, for Black and brown students and teacher candidates to just make it to the finish line. So you're absolutely right that the percentage is low. It is, and the conversation is common to what Jeremiah was saying. I've met so many people who've taken this test anywhere from 2 times to 15 and 16 times. And the test keeps going up. It started at $120 a couple of years ago. And I believe it's about $156 now every time you take it. And it depends on which one you take. It's between $130 and $156, depending on which state you're testing for. And he took 3 different tests. So imagine paying 3 different fees of more than $100.
And that's crazy. I have a question. I know it's going to get away from the playbook a little bit, but how does the teacher shortage affect, I guess, the requirements for passing the Praxis? Because I know you mentioned, Dr. Brock, that they waive some requirements. Like if you pass the SAT, if you got a good score on the SAT, what was it? They didn't have to
and
take
the ACT, SAT or ACT.
Yeah.
Lauren, I'm going to tell you, it's COVID. They did like a waiver program to allow some students to student teach without passing when otherwise they wouldn't have been able to do so. They hired some teachers, but I'm getting a lot of those clients now because what they did not tell those candidates is that you still have to pass a test. They sold a pipe dream in a lot of these school districts. And now I'm on the receiving end, as a blessing and a curse, because I see these people and they were not told the truth to begin with. You still have to pass that test if you want to keep your job. And the moratorium is over. The moratorium is passed, so you have nothing protecting you. And it's been 2 years. You have students and they're coming out not ready, and they're still under, you have 3 years to pass this exam. Or what are you going to do?
Wow, they were just cycling them in.
They were cycling them in to fill voids. We have the teacher shortages growing now as well. As I mentioned to someone the other day, here in Clark County in Nevada, we had over 40 positions that were never filled, and they decided just to do away with the program for the year. So it's a lot. They're either just pull people in that says they have a background in music but may not be fully qualified and rush them through and then charge them with having to get certified.
Wow.
And see, that leads to a whole nother bag of worms. We're gonna get to it though, but that pipe dream, I hate when I hear people say I ain't passing, but I'm working. I'm like, but you're not getting the money that
you're not getting the money.
You're not making right. And teachers don't make enough. Let's just say it. If we haven't said it enough, teachers don't get paid enough. But I kind of always feel like this is part of the plan that we're going to just throw people in where we are going to hire them. It's going to sound great because you might have just graduated. And you're going to say, all right, $30,000 a year, $40,000 a year sounds okay. They put you at baseline, and you, most cases, cannot move up that financial ladder, even if you're effective, until you're certified. And I've seen them pink slip people for a certified teacher, because legally those laws are still in place. Even in a pandemic, if they give you a conditional, you're not tenured in most cases. That means fire at will. The principal don't like you, fire. The parents don't like you, fire. Even if you're effective, you tend to get the bottom of the barrel when you don't have those papers. And we know these tests are not geared towards us. Let's just be honest. But at the same time, if you know that the narrative's against you, you can't settle for what they throw at you. That's just my spiel. Thank you, Jeremiah, for sharing. Stephanie, if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey as a music educator.
Yeah, so I am a senior at North Carolina Central University. I too dropped my music ed major, so I am this vocal performer, Eagle Pride. I dropped my major for the issues of the praxis. So I had issues even getting into the teacher's education program. So we had to take Praxis 1, and our requirements were either pass all 3.
You went mute.
No, she froze.
She froze. Oh, she froze. Okay.
Okay, there she is. Okay. Yes, we can.
Yeah. Okay. So I retook Praxis 1 and got a 522. And then I unfortunately had to take Praxis 2 twice, and I'm still waiting on my results for my second time. Or second time taking it, and prayerfully I passed it. So yeah, I am currently a teacher at a Christian school, but I am a kindergarten teacher. My goal is to teach music, but I don't know how that's gonna go after graduating. I definitely wanted to teach orchestra. My school didn't really help me prepare for that or the praxis. So I'm kind of just feeling my way around right now.
And so, we're still hearing the common narrative, not passing it before you go to school. You got to change your major. And then, here comes, you got to get a Dr. Tamisha Price Brock. And even after I graduated, it was lucrative for me for a while to tutor people through Praxis. And I hate to say, you become a market. And of course, it works to the benefit, but at the same time, it sets up that ugly narrative that we are never qualified. It kind of has that, and I think it's intentional. We can argue about it, but it's more so of that goalpost moving. And then when you think the goalpost has been moved back, we're gonna hire people during the pandemic, and you're like, yes, I can finally get in the back door. And then you get in the back door and find out that's all you're gonna do is be in the back door. You're gonna be in the kitchen for the rest of your career until you pass the test. You can't eat with the rest of the people. You can't join the union. That's important. The unions are important, especially when it comes to a lawsuit or something. They won't even send their lawyer to help you. Matter of fact, most times they'll fire you and ask questions never, because they don't see the point in investing in you. So Stephanie, you're still undergrad. Jeremiah, you are teaching. Just kind of an off the cuff question. You both have been in charter schools, right? Or a Christian school. Dr. Brock, can you speak to the certification requirements that may be different between charters and private schools? Because there's a difference that I've noticed in Maryland.
Right. As far as charter schools, it's a little bit more self-governance. So they're not under some of the state and federal mandates that the public school system is. So they can kind of guide and decide who they want as teachers is a lot of character building, a lot of experience. They want teachers who are innovative. They will work with you. If you are trying to achieve certification, they will work with you. But it's more like a nurturing environment. They do understand, just like the students learn at different rates there, and they're all about innovative curriculum. They understand that the teachers too, you have some good quality teachers out here that just may have had some difficulties with standardized testing, but they should not be held hostage or held at a barrier because they can't pass the test. So in essence, they get it. Private schools, they do too. Of course, private schools tend to have some different goals in mind, but they will still support their teachers. It's not as cutthroat as trying to get into the public school system with, not being certified. Again, private schools will give you a chance to a certain extent. And it's very important, and I know we'll talk about this later, but before the end, I would like to definitely give a quick rundown whenever you're ready of what the different tests are, what to expect, and just a general overview of how to prepare for those tests.
Absolutely. I think it's a good time to give us the rundown, like right now. Because we have people listening and we want it, and you got the baby there. Babies don't sleep forever. Right. And we don't want them to, because they cute when they up too.
Yes. Well, I'll give the short version, but there are 4 main Praxis music assessments on the market right now. You have the Praxis 5113, which is the most common and governs 29 states. That test is completely multiple choice, and the score requirements are currently range from 138 in Guam to 161, which is the highest in the nation for that particular test. The states that require the highest are DC. Well, that's of course a District of Columbia. Then you have Mississippi, Alabama, that require 161. Virginia is a 160. And then of course you have states that fall in between there. And there's another test called the Praxis 5114. It's called Music Content and Instruction, similar to 5113 in that it has multiple choice questions. But this test is unique because it has 3 constructive response or essay questions at the end. The first question is always going to be a troubleshooting question. How would you assess or correct this problem, like intonation, for example? The second question is always going to be a lesson plan question. How would you teach this concept? Or based on this score excerpt, what activities can you teach based on this score? And the third question is always going to be a score study or rehearsal prep question, because they want to assess, can you take a piece of music and adequately prepare your students to learn it and perform it? So they want you to look at the score, identify possible performance challenges, and how you would help your students overcome those challenges as you prepare them for the exam. That's the 5114 test, and I believe it's currently in 9 states to include Maryland, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Nevada, and a few others. That test is extremely hard to pass for Black and Brown students right now, the constructive response section. And I will definitely share later on a webinar I'll do later on how to conquer constructive response, because we're still writing the way we text, or we have not had adequate preparation with constructive response and essays in our music ed degree programs. We only get that in English comp classes. So that's why we tend to have problems with that particular area. The 2 brand new tests that came out, which makes sense, but then it didn't make sense because everyone didn't adopt the test. Praxis 5115 is instrumental and general knowledge. They decided to finally break up the vocal and instrumental parts so that instrumental majors could take this test without having a lot of vocal questions. It's only currently in 7 states. And of course, it assesses all of your instrumental music and general music education knowledge. And the scores kind of vary amongst the states that have adopted it. The last test is Praxis 5116, which is vocal and general knowledge. So the voice majors don't have to worry about the heavily padded instrumental questions such as transposition and fingerings on clarinet and trumpet that they may not have had access to. These tests run the gamut. 5115 and 5116 were just implemented in the midst of COVID, so more states may adopt them in the future. Right now, everything's running about the same achievement rate around Black and Brown students. We're still having the achievement gap on every test. I have seen a higher success rate, though, on the 5115 and 5116 tests, even though they're new. But those are things that I will share resources with you to share out to your constituents later on. But these tests are very broad. And there is some bias, but they've tried to work that out. It's just an extremely broad test, which is why we tend to have trouble. The greatest area of trouble, of course, is music history, composers, music theory for our Black and Brown students, technology, if you have not had an intro to technology course, and then of course that constructive response. So that's just a general, keep it short, rundown of the 4 assessments.
And so the breakdown, like I can talk from what I took. And I don't remember. We just know them by content, and then there is the constructive response. We used to just call it the hearing part. At least that's what I nicknamed it. It was like, all right, this is the stuff. So the content knowledge is from when I took it 100 years ago. It was heavy music history. It was heavy theory, and it was heavy some scenarios that I feel like at a HBCU, I didn't have a chance at, because it was questions about electronics and DAWs. And I didn't have a music technology class. I'm from the old school Morgan State, where we first started out in this antiquated building. And too much a blessing, we moved into a new facility. Like Morgan has one of the best fine arts buildings, not just white, not just black, white school, don't matter. They put a lot of money into it. And that did open up some opportunities for us to understand things like a DAW, because we had a lab. But if I was still in the original building, we didn't even touch it. We didn't even have a lab for orchestration. We ended up with a lab for orchestration. We ended up with a lab that you could do recording and studio stuff, and all of the recital hall, our large hall, the theater, the small theater, which is probably the size of some people's regular auditoriums. They all had digital equipment in it, and now they have that as a major. Like they have that as a focus that you can take because they have the facility. But I think about people who don't have those things at their school. How can you answer a question that you have, unless you are a computer engine? I mean, unless you are a music engineer major at a school like Full Sail, you just don't even know what it is. People still, there's probably people like, now, what's a DAW stand for? Digital audio workstation.
Right.
We got people arranging and don't know they're using a DAW.
That's right. That's right. And you're absolutely right. And there are, certain classes that I feel everyone should take, to be prepared for these particular tests. I just think that we've been so on our own island. If you're a music major, you only take these classes. But then they further segregated us by saying, okay, vocal majors don't need instrumental classes and vice versa. But when you go to take this test, now you're getting all the stuff that they told you didn't need to learn. So I definitely, agree with you too, with outdated or not having access to resources. A lot of the things that are on the test are things that our students would not have been exposed to at any point in their undergraduate program. But definitely going into grad school, it depends on what grad school you go to, if you're even exposed to it then, and what degree track you're on. So it's like a hit and miss. And I think we need to highlight certain things that all students need to know if they're on the music ed track.
And you just pushed me right into the next question.
The culturally biased question.
Yeah. Do you think Black and brown students are failing these teacher certification tests at a disproportionate rate than our white counterparts? You kind of said yes. I think we all could guess yes. The question is why? And this is open to the panel. Why do you think it's that disproportionate? And you could talk about anything from your undergrad experience to whatever. Answer this question how you feel. There's no shame in here. We like civil discourse. That is A-okay. And Lauren, let's hear from you. Why do you think? And I don't know if you've taken any of I don't think you've taken any of them.
Well, here's the thing, and this is to speak to my younger Eagle sister, Stephanie, what she went through. Excuse me, we went to the same alma mater, North Carolina Central University, and we are products of the same music program. I think we have a decent music program. I just feel like, so my personal experience, I was a music education major, but music education is like being a double major. And I just could not get through that education part of it. I could barely get through. I got through the music part of it, but it was tough because you're taking 10 classes a semester just in music. well, not just the music, but you're taking 10 classes because music courses are not weighted a lot. They're only weighted like 1 or 2 credits. So, by the time I got to the education portion of it, I was worn out and I dropped it. And at that point, I felt like I didn't want to be a band director. And which is crazy because now I'm teaching private lessons. But I feel like we fail at our people, Black and brown people, we fail at disproportionate rate because for a few reasons. One, music. People think that music itself is an easy major, and it's not. And a lot of us come from high schools where we're not taught theory, where we're not taught how to even methods, things like put together an instrument properly. Does the ligature face the front or the back? Certain things that, minute things that we weren't taught in middle school and high school. So when we go to become a music major, we're already set up for failure. We're behind the curve. And then there's music theory. Personally, me, I went straight through music theory. I love music theory. I loved ear training. My holdup was music history because I can write well. I just don't like writing. So yeah, some of those assignments I missed because I didn't like writing. So you have to write. You have to know the history of dead white men. And a lot of times it's not interesting. And then there's the methods courses. So hanging out with Krystal, she teaches at UMBC, and their methods courses, they have brass all year. They have brass for 2 semesters. They have woodwinds for 2 semesters and percussion for 2 semesters. At NCCU, like I said, I love my alma mater, but we only had woodwind for 1 semester. We had brass for 1 semester, and we had strings for 1 semester and percussion for 1 semester, and that's not enough. You should do like 2 instruments per semester at most, maybe 3 at most. But yeah, instead of just doing an entire instrument family in 1 semester, how long is a semester? Like 10 weeks?
It's 14 weeks at UMBC.
14 weeks. Yeah, 14 weeks, on a whole instrument family. That's not enough time. You need to spend at least a year on the instrument family. So you'll know at least some of the ins and outs of the instrument, some of the pitch tendencies, it's more than putting it together. So I feel like that's why we're disproportionate in it. I've heard of some HBCUs that offer theory and not ear training, which is crazy because they go hand in hand. They try to cut corners, like they'll offer a music degree, but they'll cut corners within the music degree. Everything has to be incorporated together. And Stephanie, personally, I'm so sorry that you wanted to teach orchestra. Unfortunately, our alma mater doesn't have an orchestra. We don't have an orchestra program. We have an excellent cellist. I love him. He's one of my favorites. But we do not have an orchestra program. So how can Stephanie learn how to teach an orchestra without orchestra? Like, yeah, any one of us could teach band because it's the marching sound machine, it's the wind ensemble, it's the symphonic band. Yeah, we're all about the and especially jazz band. We could teach jazz because we're big on the jazz program, but there's no orchestra. And Stephanie, I feel for you, and you'll probably, like Dr. Brock said, you'll probably have to go to a graduate school where there's an orchestra where you can learn how to conduct an orchestra, because conduct an orchestra and conduct a band are completely different per Dr. Melvin M. Miles,
Mm-hmm.
and it is because orchestral directors, they're like half a beat off. If you really listen to the orchestras, they're half a beat behind the conductor. So, not knowing those nuances is why we tend to fail the praxis.
And you went in a lot of places, but I feel a lot of it with itself is just access. The last part of that DEI,
Mm-hmm.
it's the A. If you never do it, if you never seen it, if you've never touched it, how can you learn it? We learn best by touching things. And I was going to throw this question in from the woodwind, because like Lauren said, so at UMBC, our setup is this. I teach all the method classes except percussion. I'm glad I can teach all the classes because I got that undergrad. So that means that my method classes undergrad were thorough enough for me to teach collegiate methods courses. And so our woodwind class, we do saxophone and clarinet and flute, saxophone, clarinet together. So we spend 6 weeks on saxophone exclusively, 6 weeks on clarinet. I start with clarinet because it's the only open hole, truly open hole woodwind. And that has a whole lot of quirks to itself. And there's 4 clarinet players on this screen. So we know. Then saxophone is like, if you can play clarinet, saxophone is an easy transition. And then in the next semester, I teach flute and oboe. So that means that they leave having touched the double reed instrument. How many of our HBCUs where there weren't enough of those double reeds to even touch it? You may have talked about it, but if you didn't touch it, you don't know the embouchure and how it feels. You don't know about half fingerings. You don't know about the dexterity differences between those instruments. So you just don't know what you don't touch. But UMBC is not a PW, is a PWI. It's very diverse, but it kind of makes me sad because the school isn't very big and the staff is small. We're not a big school, but we've figured it out. You know, we probably have less instructors at UMBC than we have at Morgan. Easy. Wow, I'm teaching all the method courses. Cybil, why do you think it's a disproportionate failure rate amongst our Black and brown music educators or potential music educators versus our other, just to be honest, our white counterparts? Think you still muted, sis? That mute button killing us. Make sure your audio is set to whatever device you're on. Like you might have to, if you got headphones on. Nope. If you're on a laptop, you might need to make sure the audio device. Now I feel like I'm back in music tech land. Make sure your microphone setting. Talk. Nope. Can't hear you. You on a laptop
too?
What'd you say?
Her signal was going in and out.
Yeah. It's probably more of the device you're on. You're on a phone or a laptop. Or pop in, come back out. Try that. Your laptop, try to come back in on your phone because that's what I had to do. So while we're waiting for Cybil to come back, because I want Cybil to answer this because she is over music education majors, and so am I. Now at UMBC, I just got a contract to be the liaison. Woo! Right. So this praxis question is important. These teacher certification questions are important. Let me just throw this out there as a question. What should our colleges be teaching to help Black and brown students pass? We already know it's disproportionate. And we'll get back to the why, but what do you think they should be teaching?
Well, definitely. One thing, the conversation needs to start in freshman orientation before the semester even starts. So the students need to already have a clear understanding of what's expected of them in the entire degree program, from the coursework that's expected, the recital requirement, the level of performance required, and the capstone or exam requirements. That way they can make an informed decision before the program even begins. But their freshman year, I think it definitely needs to be an introductory year. They need to take the introductory courses to everything they will need to set them up for the rest of their curriculum. So intro to music education, intro to music history, Intro to Music Theory or their Music Fundamentals course, and Intro to Music Technology or music business. They definitely need to have a background in that. I also feel that regardless if you are an instrumental or a vocal major, because many states have not adopted the test that splits both parts, and because our students, when they graduate, won't know what placement they're going to get if they're going to be required to teach band and choir or guitar or orchestra, it's important that they have all of those foundational classes. Voice class, while that's for everyone needs to take vocal diction. They need to understand that because they ask about diphthongs on the exam. They ask about phonetic spellings of words on the exams. And to a clarinet player or a tuba player or a percussionist, they're not going to understand that. Intro to Music Technology, definitely need to know that you have students now who are student arrangers in their programs and have no idea what the technical terms are for the devices they're using. You know, they know Finale, they know MuseScore and Finale Notepad, but they don't know what the DAW is, what the digital audio workstation is, what the MIDI is, you know, the musical instrument digital interface, you know, understanding the different MIDI buttons, what key velocity does, what sampling is, equalization and quantization, understanding those terminologies and when to use it, knowing how to save a file and knowing why when you try to move a JPEG, every time you repost it, it distorts the image instead of taking it as a TIFF file and moving it into your document. I just think that those courses need to be taught, but beyond that, it goes back to why are we disproportionate? Our professors need to know what's on the exam, and we need to reassess and evaluate our antiquated curriculum and have an open mind to come into the 21st century at some point and teach the new age curriculum, teach to the new age profession, because not only is the curriculum and our students changing, but the profession itself is changing. And that's one thing I love about being on both sides, having a higher ed experience and being recent out of the classroom in K-12, knowing the new trends that are out here. Our teachers need to take the test. You can't sit behind a desk and tell someone they need to take the Praxis if you've never taken it yourself, if you have no clue what's on it. And I'm going to put it out there. I guarantee you that half of our professors, if we took the test today, a lot of our professors would fail the exam themselves. But we need that level of transparency, because in that level of transparency and vulnerability, I believe that our educators will be more sensitive to what our students are going through, and they will immediately change their approach to their classes. You cannot teach music history the same way you taught it 20 years ago. No one wants to take notes for an hour. No one wants to sit there and hear you talk to them for an hour. And as Black and brown people, why are we teaching music history and we never get to world music until the end of the semester for one unit in a brief conversation? It needs to be embedded throughout, because we're taught that the medieval period started things, when in actuality it was the music of China and Japan. It was the music of Asia. It was animism in Tuba and Mongolia. That's among the oldest in the world. And I just think that if we have those conversations early, if our educators would take the exam and take it often, I recommend every 2 years for our lead faculty, so our music ed coordinators and our department chairs, and then once every 4 years for everyone else who teaches music education courses. But I think those are the courses that we need early out. Everyone needs Intro to Music Ed, Music Technology, Intro to Theory and History, and then of course, making sure that we don't save administration and supervision for grad school. We need to know how to budget, because that's on the exam, but it's also going to help you keep your job as an educator and not go over budget your first year, because you can't travel everywhere your first year. So I think administration and supervision, and then family and community engagement are also important too. Knowing how to talk to your parents in the community, knowing how to talk to a diverse community, I think are also very important. So those are just some of the courses that I recommend to be successful on your teacher certification test, but just to be successful in your first 3 years of teaching as well.
We need it. Thank you. Thank you. I was like, I can't do it on my phone. I was looking for the applause. Woo. Listen here. This was a good word. This was a good word to my soul, because I passed it. I passed it and didn't study for it.
Mm-hmm.
I passed both. And I'm in Maryland. Our score is 162. And I'm going to throw this out there. Maryland, I might be wrong by a few numbers, but I know Maryland's in the top 5 in the nation for public education. I know as a fact. You can't say there's a correlation like you, and we're not a largely white state. The largest school districts in the nation are in Maryland, little Maryland, little Maryland, like the largest school districts. So, why? Some people argue, well, let's lower the score. And like during the pandemic, we did get rid of the test for some people. But if correlation is that you will have a better education system with it, then I don't know, devil's advocate, we need to change the test for sure. But I'm not an advocate of getting rid of a test. And I know some people like will fight that. I'm for making the test more equitable. I'm for better teacher certification programming. I'm going to say as a college professor, what I like about my university where I teach now is that their internships start their freshman year. My students have 4 years of internship time before they student teach. They're at my son's school. That makes a difference. And my son's school is in Baltimore City. So that means they are in the thick of it. They're not hiding and running out to the richest county. They're getting hands-on experience in the thick of it. You know what our Praxis pass rate is? Above 90%. Just sometimes sitting in a seasoned instructor's room even helps, especially we have that part 2 that a lot of people don't want to do, that constructive response. They give scenarios like, listen to this audio example and tell all of the errors in the rehearsal. And people are like, what? Mm-hmm. What's the errors in the rehearsal? And you have to listen to it. And some untrained ears would say nothing.
Right.
I tutored someone a couple of, like 10 years ago. And I remember giving him some YouTube clips of a band playing. I said, I need you to write a response to all of the errors that you hear in the audio example. And I need you to write a troubleshooting response, because that's basically what you need to be able to do for that part. The first thing he said is, none of it sounds wrong. It sounds good to me. And I said, oh, How do we fix that?
It's not enough hands-on or practical experience or real experiences. I love what you said about how you have the internship starting freshman year. I advocate for that too, having real relevant experiences. Student teaching should not be the first time you get in front of students. It should not be the first time. Orchestration class should not be the first time a music major gets on the podium in a band rehearsal. If you're a music major, you should regularly be on the podium. So that you get that experience, conducting experience as well. But I definitely agree, the ear training experience, what we get it in oral skills, if, like Lauren said, if your program teaches oral skills, you may get sight singing and ear training. It should go beyond just the practical book examples in class. You have to be able to answer questions in your ensemble rehearsals and troubleshoot issues. The director should kind of yield sometimes and say, hey, you're a music major, how can they fix this? I think if our ensemble directors get in on the action too and allow our music majors to kind of troubleshoot in actual rehearsals in live settings, it gives them more of a practical experience with a real live ensemble. And so when they have to do it on the test or have to do it for real, they're already used to it and they're sensitive to those changes.
And I'm going to throw it out there, and we're going to have an honest question. I had a show called The Old Guard. Here's a problem. Most of them, the test didn't exist when they started teaching college. So some of them have never taken any of these. They have no idea what's on it. So they can't always, you can't prepare students for what you don't know. And you have to, and if you have tenure, there's no real reason for you to have to know outside of if we start tracking, graduation rates and we start to see, the effects of that, or we start to see that our university doesn't put out music educators that stay in the field. We start tracking that type of data. If somebody wanted to, they would be able to poke holes into, our most beloved institutions. And that's unfortunate because we want to protect our own, but it's hard to protect our own when we see like a trend. Cybil, I hope that your audio works because you're in the thick of it.
Can you hear me?
A little bit you crackly, so if you sitting back, you're gonna have to move up, I think.
Testing.
Yeah, you a
1,
little
2,
crackly,
3.
but we can hear you.
Okay. Is this fine? Y'all want me to get up like this?
Not your hair, sis. Uh, you just
I hate that my
we
stuff's
can
not
hear you.
working.
Yeah,
Okay,
it happens
so
to me like every week. I don't know
I'll
why.
say one thing that kind of in the defense of professors is not every professor went to school for education, first of all, so they didn't even have to take the test. So in their defense, they may not, like y'all say, even be privy to what's on it, how important it is, and why they need to be teaching, the things that are on that test. But in addition to that, they should be willing, when you come to them with information that can be beneficial to their classes, to implement that in the class and to take that with grace and implement it instead of necessarily complaining about, well, why is this on here or why is that? It's kind of like, I understand both sides, like Dr. Brock said. And I think we are disproportionate because a lot of that stuff that you were talking about, Krystal and Marilyn, y'all are exposed to from babyhood. It's a part of your culture. And so in certain states, they don't experience those things sometimes until college, and then sometimes not even in college. So we're at a disadvantage because of exposure. Not necessarily that we can't grasp it, but we don't even know what to grasp.
Mhm.
So
That's
I like
good.
that's one
that. I
thing that I
like that.
think.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, that's good.
I,
We don't even know what the grass. Ooh.
Yeah, that's really powerful. You're absolutely right. A lot of students feel that they're blindsided when it comes to the information on the exam. They feel like it's guarded information. Like the professor, I had one student, even when I did my dissertation, said, yeah, my professor sprung it on me like it was a surprise gift junior year that I needed to be taking these exams, and that, oh, by the way, I need to take this exam in order to take the rest of my education courses. So is blindsided, not knowing what to grasp, and said, what do I do with this? That's what the person told me. He was like, what am I supposed to do with this information if I'm just finding out about it? And my parents expect me to graduate by this certain time, or they're not going to finish paying for my education.
That part. Stephanie, you're the one that it affects directly.
Absolutely.
What do you think you needed to be able to pass that test the first time and never have to pay all that money again?
I will definitely say I would have needed to be exposed before my junior year. They push Praxis, but that's Praxis 1. I had no idea about a Praxis 2. I also didn't know that I wouldn't be able to take certain classes until I passed Praxis 2. I'm a first generation college student. My parents have no idea what I'm doing at all.
Yep. Me
And
too.
the people who are in my village who did go to college and even were music education majors, they went to school in the 90s. They didn't have to do what I'm doing. So there's literally no counsel that I really didn't have help, honestly, until Professor Haskins came to my school, until she brought Dr. Brock. And I didn't know, like, when I took the Praxis the first time, all the study materials that my best friend paid money for, like books, none of that stuff was on the Praxis. We were taking Praxis 2 tests. I promise you, it was like somebody was like, this is a little sprinkle of mistake, and this is what you're gonna need to know. And we got,
Wow.
there was none of it up there. So I would definitely say more exposure. I also would say more advocates. I feel like a lot of people I can just speak for Central. Um, they're big on like it's your responsibility, but we need guidance. We really don't know what we're doing. I've had a professor even to like look at the book that we were studying from and say, I'm glad I don't have to take this test. So, we didn't have the guidance that we needed to have. And then going back to high school, music theory was an AP class. My high school is it's an IB magnet school. So we have AP and IB classes. Well, I signed up for AP music theory my senior year, but because 4 people registered, they dropped the class.
Which high school did you go to, by the way?
Needham Broughton High School in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Which one?
Needham
Broughton. Oh, Broughton. You went to Broughton. Okay.
Yeah.
The one that looks like a castle. I've been there. I've been there. Yes, I pulled up and I said, "What is this?" And I was amazed. It was a fortress.
Oh yes, it is literally huge. But even that, like, I wasn't, and I was in orchestra, I was in band, I was in all higher level ensembles. We didn't start jazz band. We didn't do any composition stuff. Like we probably like composition for like 2 days. I promise you. Orchestra. I was section leader for the bass, so I literally was all into orchestra from the 4th grade to 12th grade. And I got to Central. They were like, orchestra, you can play bass for the jazz band, and that was it. So just also this
Oh,
My
um
heart hurts. Oh my goodness.
yeah, I don't like that.
I
I
don't like
was
that either.
definitely knowing what we were up for freshman year, because you come in saying, well, I'm music ed. I didn't even know you had to audition. That's the first gen thing. I didn't know you had to
Yeah.
audition a week of auditions. And then you come in as a music ed, but you're not considered music ed until your junior year when you're done with all GCs. I didn't know that either.
Yeah. Yep.
Wow.
So just somebody always telling you what you're actually doing, and it doesn't make sense that you're not music ed and I'm taking education courses and I'm taking music courses. You know what I'm saying? So just somebody who always tells me what the curriculum is, what I need to be preparing for, and not telling me after I've already failed a test, like, well, y'all should have taken notes on this because this is on the praxis. I've had teachers say, well, we got students coming back now because they weren't paying attention in class and now they need help on the praxis. Like,
Mm.
those kind of things. And then my last thing was like the tech side. I took what was it called? Acoustics. That was really just like sound waves 101. That was it. I didn't learn all the extra tech stuff, the JPEG, the like the file names. When I saw those on the first time, I was like, is this a glitch? Like, are they just putting letters to be? So
Right.
I literally didn't know.
Lord.
hmm it's interesting. That is heartbreaking. Wow. But it definitely, Krystal, it speaks to everything that you and I have talked about in the past. And I think, Lauren, we've talked about this as well. And Cybil,
Yeah.
just, just the need for, what I'm trying to do. But hopefully we can get a task force together to sit down at a round table, because you know how you always say everyone knows what the problem is, but when are you going to become part of the solution? It's time for us to take action. It's time for us to say, okay, let's put together a round table. I know I did a presentation called revamping the music education or transforming music education, starting first with a focus on our HBCUs, because of course a proud HBCU graduate, I'm going to support ours first. But we need to find a way to take action with our students, because Stephanie, your story is like, I met you in the fall, but I had no clue until right now that this is truly what you were going through. It even goes back to recruitment. And I think sometimes being selfish, we have to think with what's best for our students when we try to recruit them. I understand we want people for our programs, but at the end of the day, we have to remember that they're student musicians and they want a career out of this. We cannot, again, selling those false hopes and pipe dreams. She should have been told up front in high school that her school did not have an orchestra program, or if it didn't and they really wanted her, there should have been a provision in place to introduce her to the community orchestra. If she really wanted to go there are ways around it. And still, if you fell in with love the school, Central's a great school. I love the campus. It's a beautiful school, but there are ways around it. If you don't have the program, connect your students with someone who does and show those partnerships. It's all about synergy, working together towards a common goal. And that goal is graduating our students and helping them get from recruitment to commencement and beyond. This is heartbreaking. I have no words. I have no words.
Yeah,
Stephanie's story is my story. So
wow.
I wanted to be performance. And, if you're not education or jazz, you're kind of falling by the wayside. So
True.
Stephanie, I feel like your story mirrored my story. So yeah, I don't want to get into it, but yeah.
That's a good point.
It's discouraging.
But that's a good point too. We're not doing enough. Yeah. Go ahead.
We have the performance side now. So you can be instrumental or vocal. But I will say with HBCUs, there's always a band focus, and I'm vocal performance. I am an instrumentalist, but I've been singing since I was 2 years old. So I did voice. I also didn't know about the audition, so I can't audition on upright, right? So, I feel like for advising side, I feel like you should have an advisor who can do both and not just, know the band stuff and not just connect band or instrumentalists with other instrumentalists, but connect the vocalists with other vocalists. And, what I'm saying? Let us merge together because there are a lot of vocal performance majors who don't know anything about instruments. There's a lot of instrumental majors that, they might have to take a voice class, but they can't teach choir. So I feel like it should be like a merging of something. Like we should all have to come together. And then I will say for conducting, I was blessed to have a conducting professor who was about conducting, period, and not just HBCU band conducting. He was really like emphasizing this is how you conduct an ensemble, period. So from what I've heard, that's not every college experience nor HBCU experience.
Right.
I
That's
don't think
what I said
That's
about the
heartbreaking.
conducting.
Oh,
Like, and different ensembles conduct different ways. With jazz, you really don't conduct jazz. You can conduct a jazz program, but they're more free. Orchestras, they conduct the ensemble is like half a beat behind it, but also the ensemble is too different in an orchestra because like in Europe they're tuned at 432, whereas here we're tuned at 440. So that's just some of those small things that we're missing, from our professors. Things that
those
I
small things
learned
are big things, though.
I learned in my adult life. I'm not talking about like, the couple of years after college, like my big age life that I learned and not in undergrad. And Stephanie, my advice to you for somebody my age, I graduated from NCCU in 2010 and 2011. Learn as much as you can now. Don't wait.
My thing is, imagine, first of all, with a test, everybody knows no matter what the test is about, it's test of faith, test of content knowledge, test of jumping rope. It's something you've already prepared for. So when you take it, it ain't supposed to be nothing scary like that. It should be common knowledge. So imagine going through a matriculation of 4 years and thinking, well, I got all A's, so I'm getting ready to pass this test because this is what I've been preparing for, and none of it is on the test. That's got to be discouraging to go through the whole matriculation and one test determines whether or not you're certified. And on top of that, I'm just being honest, I know some dynamic band directors, dynamic choral directors that failed that test.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, with all due
Let's talk
respect,
about
a
it.
lot of extra stuff on there that I feel it qualifies you like times 40 to be a K-12 teacher. Because honestly, some of those things you're not going to need. And I'm not saying dismiss the test because I think we need to have respect on the name of music education, but I also think that it needs to be comparable to what you're going to do.
Exactly. And
That's
yeah.
real.
But she mentioned being scared about the test, and I can imagine it with Stephanie and others. And Krystal, I'm sure with a lot of people who cycled through the districts in Maryland as well, is they'll tell you that I was afraid of it, or I avoided or I changed my major because I was afraid of taking the test, or I changed my major not to take the test. That, and then I think Jeremiah mentioned anxiety, when he said he was under the gun, test anxiety, but that even equates to performance anxiety, and I think you alluded to it too with and someone said an emphasis on performance. I know Stephanie mentioned things being heavy band related. I just think our music programs too are often really performance heavy, and it's all about getting prepared for some performance. Every time we turn around, we're preparing for some performance, but it's not enough on the theory and the practical pedagogy of what we need to learn to even be better musicians, let alone future music educators. But even something simple as preparing for your senior recital. Someone would get up there and mess up, and we automatically go to, oh, well, they didn't practice, they weren't prepared. They could have prepared like there's no tomorrow. They could just be a good shower singer or shower performer and get afraid in front of people. Yet there's not a conversation or a practice seminar before the semester starts to conquer performance anxiety, how to deal and cope with stage fright, you know, and that equates to test anxiety. You may know everything you need for that test, and just the fact that it could, like Cybil said, it could decide your entire fate. That's a lot right there to kind of
your money.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day,
yes.
it's your livelihood. Not to cut you off. It's so crazy that I always tell people I would be miffed. I'd be pissed if I spent this much money, got this many school loans, marched my knees into the ground. The cartilage is rubbing on bone now. And we can all raise our hands to that one. The cartilage, there ain't no padding there no more, hitting on 2 and 4. Just say it. And then I can't get a teaching job. Right. And salary's already low. I can't come out and get at least the baseline pay as a teacher. I would be pissed. I would go back. I'm a fiery engine. My name I was trying to put in there is Aquarius Uncut, because for another 14 days, I'm going to be an Aquarius. And I would be back at my university. I would be at the department chair's door like, you failed me. And I know that's a hard thing to say. And I know we want to protect us. And I'm a professor too. I always tell my students, if you go out into this world and from my classroom, my high school classroom, you can't pass the theory test to get into college, because I teach theories levels 2, 3, and AP. We are a Black and brown school that offers 4 levels of theory. I ain't gonna talk about who teach theory 1. Let's just say I have to fix it in theory 2. And then by theory 3, I'm teaching kind of double work, and then AP. But guess what? They all go to college. If they're going to major in music, guess what they pass through? That entry theory level test. They test out theory 1. They test out piano. But that's not the scenario for everybody. High school, I'm glad you mentioned this, Stephanie. There are high schools, like my students can part write better than some juniors in college right now. My juniors in high school can out part write some juniors in college, and not even Black or white. Like our liaison at University of Maryland, the music ed liaison came, and she said, this scenario is not the textbook. This is the exception to a rule. She was floored. She was checking her theory in the class, because the kids were like, you started out in an open position and you're going to have a range issue. I mean, they were checking her. And I was just quiet, like, Go on, Black and brown babies. Tell them you can't start like that. So the theory, curriculum wise, this is my opinion. We have to approach theory differently. That's what I teach. So I'm going to say, if you still approaching it from a completely Eurocentric mindset, that's not even going to work to pass the test now.
No.
And Tamisha, you can talk about the theory portion. There's no way that you're going to get through it if you don't have form and analysis.
You're right. Them chord progressions, those circle progressions, and just knowing your music, being overly sensitive. I tell people all the time, you see artists, art majors, they're always drawing something, right? Engineering majors, they're always constructing and putting something together. But we won't often add to our playlist the music that will help us with our profession. We're listening to our popular music, which is great, but we also need to add to the playlist and constantly engulf ourselves in the profession, but also use your popular music to your advantage. You're riding down the street listening to Future, listening to Jasmine Sullivan, you need to be analyzing those chords in the background, being sensitive to what's happening. But you're right. We can't take a cookie cutter approach to theory with our Black and brown students, especially when, like Lauren said, and like Stephanie said, they may not have had the foundation in high school. They don't have the time to learn from scratch. You have to give them a crash course and fast, using the shortcut method. I don't have all day to teach you from ground zero. I'm going to teach you the shortcut method, make it practical to what you have, and let's keep it moving. And I just think sometimes we're so stuck on what the textbook says and what the syllabus says that we forget to educate the person. and forget that we have to differentiate instruction because, you know, Stephen might not learn it like Leslie, you know, so we have to make sure that we are approaching it in a way that makes sense to them and they can take it back to what they see in their community. You have to relate it to something they see every day.
To add to that, the only reason my students are successful because I had to take the curriculum and remix it. Those of you who need a good theory book to buy, if you're a professor, if you're undergrad, if you're in high school and you want to be a music ed major and you want a book that's going to be a little more relevant than that old musicianship book or that tone harmony book, which I do use for my students, it's called Music Theory Remixed. That book will get you through every section of theory because we have to be honest, culturally, there are more cultures that understand theory than just a Eurocentric mindset. So it's called Music Theory Remix. I use it. I've added, and if I didn't create my own curriculum, I can't see those Black and brown students doing the same way they're doing now in my theory class than if you just going through that textbook and spitting out definition terms and all these white only examples just to call it what it is. Keita said, has anyone touched on the fact that there are 3 different music tests, but most state departments only accept the one?
I kind of mentioned that, and I see where she's going. Yeah, it's the 4 tests out there, but long as you pass and you're fully licensed, they will take the reciprocity. But if you have passed the exam and you have not gotten your license yet, you may be faced with having to take that state's exam. That's like for the states that take 5113 and not 5114 or GACE. You know, if you have not been licensed and you're trying to go to Georgia, they want you to take GACE. Texas wants you to take the Texas exam. You know, so yeah, definitely there is a truth to that point. But if you have your license, a full license, then you do have some buying power.
I wanted to shoot the same question to Jeremiah because Jeremiah's been waiting there patiently. I don't know if you still with us, but what did you need to have been able to pass that test the first try? What did you need, or what would you have needed undergrad to be able to have done it without spending all that money?
Yeah. Can you all hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. What did I need? I don't know if I'm gonna put a little onus on myself too. I don't necessarily know if a lot of the classes I was taking were, 1, framed around the test, and 2, if I was in the classes kind of like, yo, I'm in here because I got to do this down the road. You know what I'm saying? Like I was kind of just in the classes to pass. And of course I was a music major, so I knew I had to take sight singing. I knew I had to take theory. I knew I had to take a voice class, but I don't know if I was framing my time in the classes as you're doing all of this because at some point you're going to have a test that's going to assess your knowledge and all of it. So those first couple of tries, I mean, I was just flabbergasted at what was on the exam. Like I felt like a tornado probably hit my face because I just didn't. It was so overwhelming, right? And I think it was discouraging, but it was probably more difficult out of school, obviously, right? Because at least while I was in school, I could say, well, let me go back and go to textbooks to find resources, whatever. But once I was out of school, you know, I was living my life. I had job obligations. I had, you know, like personal life stuff. It was 10 times harder to try to prepare for that test. So, I mean, I could say that the professors that I had could have led me in a direction to help me pass, but I don't know. Like, I don't know. All I know is my experience. I don't know what to compare it to. I don't know if others, like in Norfolk State, the big PWI around us is Old Dominion. I can't say if Old Dominion had classes that were strategically structured so students would be able to pass with high level on the Praxis II. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just know what my experience was, and I know what I did and what I didn't do and what was at my disposal and what wasn't at my disposal. And because of that, I kind of took the path that I took, you know?
So I like the fact that that's real. because I deal with that with my high school students who are, we call them music majors because they test into this school, they audition into this school. So it is it's the predecessor to being a music major in college. And so a lot of its structures, like Lauren, she's been up there before as substitute. A lot of our structures are, this is how it looks in college. And I do see my students kind of like, why do I need to know this theory, or why did this? And I have a young lady, she's so talented. We have full orchestra. We have band, 2 band directors, orchestra, voice. We have a show choir. So we are comprehensive. We're about us, and they get private lessons during the day. So there's no gap in access. They play on professional horns. Some of my students have a better horn than I have. Real. They're playing on professional. I mean, they look like us. But even still, sometimes they come to class and they're dragging or whatever, or they're just not really engaged. And I have a few students, seniors, that they know they're going to study music. I don't worry about the performance majors because they're taking private lessons. You know who I worry about? The music ed ones, the ones who are going to go and teach, because they're in theory and they're kind of still behind the ball for where we're at. And I'm saying, if you do this right here, you could take your tonal harmony workbook to college with right answers. And I told a beautiful little black girl, beautiful. She is a violinist and she is thorough. She could play grade 6 music on violin. The orchestra is a grade 6 ensemble, period, of Black and brown children. I told her, take your book and don't say anything about what you got in high school. Take it and be the brightest star in an ensemble. And she's looking at some PWIs because the orchestra is not everywhere for us. And I told her, don't say anything. Don't tell him you have 4 years of theory. Don't say that. Don't tell him that your private instructor, y'all have private instructors from the president's own. Don't say none of that. Go in and flex, because they already going to expect you to, they're going to just think that you don't know anything. And they're going to think that you're already lazy. So I said, take your workbook with you. We even buy the tonal harmony books for them. They don't have to buy that book, which means it's a public school. The resources are there. That's what makes me a little upset. Those of you who teach AP theory, there is now a pre-AP theory class that students can take as a general music class. So those of you who get thrown that I'm gonna call it stupid because the curriculum is dated and it doesn't work. Survey of music. I got rid of survey of music and switched it out for pre-AP, because pre-AP is a performance-based AP prep class. How powerful would that be if Black and brown students, instead of taking survey of music, could take pre-AP? I begged and I got certified in pre-AP. I was already certified in AP, but you got to get both certificates. And I'm the only one in the state that's certified in both. But those students test out. That's what type of pipeline we need. We don't even need them to have to struggle through Theory 1 in college. We want them out of it. Save them some money.
I think it was Jacoby and Host who said something like all children should have the right to be exposed to a quality music education on every level. And what you're experiencing is something that shouldn't be like the pot of gold somewhere. That should be everywhere. Because again, that's where the disproportionate stuff is taking place. Every high school should be teaching history, theory, ear training. Even if they only have a band class, they just have to figure out some way to incorporate that so those kids are set up for success when they come and trying to audition for collegiate bands. Just because you're not going to be in music in college doesn't mean I'm not going to teach you everything that I know while you're in high school, because the chemistry teachers do it, the math teachers do it, everybody else does it. So, and again, we got to start putting respect on music education's name, and those peoples in the high schools and the middle school need to be incorporating that stuff at that time. So it's like I saw this before. I don't know what it is, but I've at least seen that. You know what I'm saying?
And I think you're right. You're right about that. Jeremiah, I thought you were unmuted.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, I didn't know if you were trying to speak.
Oh no. I'm just taking it all in. I'm here.
Can I say
I
something?
hear that. I got a question. So this is a question since we're along this realm anyway. Are there any questions or sections on the test that are inherently biased? Like you just know, reading that question when you took that test. I know I got a few that if you took the test or that you've heard people talk about this section, and you just like, why? Why do we need this?
I would say for me, the first time I took it, most of the history questions, I had no idea who some of those people were. Um, it's not people that I've even seen their name anywhere. Um, I will say if you have a heavy classical, a heavy, especially like instrumental background, I would say like somebody who has been studying like violin, classical music for like years and years. Those are names that will pop up for them. But for me, I'm a little country church girl. I ain't never seen this before. So the history was my biggest challenge. Um, and I think after history, it will be technology or like that. No, I lied. After history, it will be what's it called? Instructional.
Instructional practices,
Yeah,
like that
probably.
section. Yeah, I agree. Music history wasn't hard, but I know why it wasn't hard for me. But ironically, you know what was hard for me? Music technology. Go figure. That's what people know me as for now. It's like I did terrible in that section. I know I did. I passed, but that wasn't it because we didn't have it access.
Right. I agree. I think to Stephanie's point with music history is a lot of questions up there that are questions that are unnecessary on the exam. The questions that said put these composers in order from earliest to latest according to their date of birth. Who cares? It has no bearing on the work they wrote. It has no bearing on how you're going to teach someone how to play the open strings on a violin. It has no bearing on how you're going to teach, the vowels and things in a choir. So that question is definitely unnecessary questions like that. You have a lot of questions on vocabulary that's not a part of the standard language in wind bands in America, such as etwas labaf. That's a German term used by Beethoven to mean a bit lively. We use babaji, so why not keep it steady? It's almost like a potpourri question, potpourri test, where we say, "Oh, this looks good. Let's throw this question on the test," and it's so broad, it's like it never ends. It's like the never-ending story. So a lot of those questions in the history portion are unnecessary. But when you say is a test inherently biased, when it gets to the world music category, they will stress the music of Asia, the music of Southeast Asia, Indonesia, but you'll have 2 questions about West Africa. You'll have no questions about the Middle East. When you get to the Caribbean, they go to the same question every time. Where did the steel drums originate? Trinidad and Tobago. But what about everything else that happened on those islands? And is unbiased in that way that they add, the world history. They talk about animism and throat singing. Yes, we know it originated in Mongolia, but there are many other Black and brown cultures that also believe in animism. And even the connection with Mardi Gras, it's a form of animism. Voodoo in Haiti, is not just, people cursing people. It is definitely connected, but they won't put that on the test. But we have to learn about music in the Appalachian Mountains and things like that. So I definitely agree that there are a few biased questions on the exam. And my personal opinion, especially in the state of North Carolina, the biasness for me that I've seen from my clients is not necessarily on the exam itself, but on the scoring. More specifically, the scoring in the constructive response section. I had 10 clients when they came to me. Now, these clients have all different skill levels, so there's no way that their score should have been the same. Every last one of them, when they first met me, they had an 8 out of 18 on the constructive response. What did I tell them? The next time you take the test, put that you're white or that you're Asian. Their scores went up. The scores went up. State of North Carolina, 10 clients before they met me said they all reported the same score. These clients did not know each other. they all got an 8. They all took the test within the same 2 months of each other, and they all put that they were African American. I told them, next time you take the test, put that you're a white or Asian or anything like that, and don't even change it. And I said, if you're willing to do this and just take it again without making any changes, I will pay for your test, just to make sure, because you're going to take it just to see if the color of your demographic changes your score, and it did. So it's that's one thing too. And I see someone said South Carolina too. I believe that's the case in South Carolina, but this is a 5114 exam I'm mentioning, the constructive response. The highest score you can get on constructive response is 18 points. Why, if you have different skill levels, these are people that range from 2.5 to 4.0 GPAs. Why is everyone scoring an 8? One was a minor in English. I don't, so it just didn't add up to me that you got an 8 out of 18. So that's where I see the bias coming right now with that particular exam.
I agree with that.
Crazy. Yeah,
And
that's
Stephanie's a string player, so strings wasn't a challenge for her. But at most HBC, well, not most, quite a few HBCUs, that string section is a killer too. Because some schools don't have orchestras, like you said, and maybe well, I'll just leave it there. But yeah, that's
that
area.
strings terminology kills people every time. Most band people will say, what is a colegno? So it's just that terminology. But yeah, as far as like biasness, yeah, it's broad, but I think the unnecessary portions are in music history and the biasness is in the scoring.
wow. Lauren, I'm gonna shout you out for a second, because Lauren has never taken the test, correct? Lauren, you've never taken the test. When Dr. Brock was posting those questions, Lauren was almost getting them all right.
Yes, she did.
And I didn't Google them for anyone who
we did not Google them. And sometimes she's beat me to the punch and I was beat her to the punch. But my issue is this. Why isn't the curriculum uniform amongst state schools in a way that as a professor, you have to touch on these things as a part of the test in the music history class? Now, here's how I learned music history. This is why I didn't fail it. And this is old school AF. All right. Melissa Hendricks, Spelman grad, and SAI charter from Spelman taught music history. Our final exam was a composition book. You know what she did? Explain music from the antiquity to the 21st century, include genres, key composers, schools of music, forms of music, and how they developed from the social and societal issues of the time as one question.
So write a history book.
Write a history book. So when I used to tutor people and I knew their history, I said, you know what? You want to know how to study for that music history portion? Get a music history book, a westernized music history book that touches on some world music, because I knew looking at the test, I said, there ain't a lot there. And answer this question. And every week I would say, okay, what about Josquin Perez? What about the first schools of music? Who invented them? What's the dates for these for these music periods? Who are the key composers? Because that's how you have to rattle off information for that
Exactly.
That was why she gave us a composition book and said, answer this question, explain music. That's basically what the question was. We wrote for 2 hours and I still was writing. I ran out of time. It looked like a book itself. I probably made it about halfway through that composition book in 2 hours, back and front. That's how you study for it. And that's sad. That's ridiculous.
I will say though, I think that is very important, especially for HBCUs and for first gen. I feel like it's one thing to have like a great teacher, but I feel like the educator has to know how. I don't just need to learn information so I can regurgitate it and take a test. I want to retain it and apply it. And so I don't need to know just information. Teach me how to know, like how to learn it, right? So, like I said, I didn't like music history, music theory. That's not something I, grew up. So you're giving me all of these concepts and these principles, and so I know what you just said, and I can say to you back what you just said. But what's not sticking with me is like why it matters and like the significance of it. Like I don't know how to understand the
Right.
information that you're giving me. And I think that's one of the reasons why. And I love theory. So theory was okay for me. History, and I love history, period. But for some reason, because it's so concentrated, music history threw me for a loop.
Mm-hmm.
And then having to, you were talking about you had someone who was a writing minor. I was an English writing minor. So I'm not bad at it. I just don't know how to understand this information and then write it down. And like, I'm big on, if I'm learning something, I want to learn it enough so that I will be able to explain it even to the people. Like,
Exactly.
if I had to explain to like a 6-year-old, I want to know what that.
That's
and that's
right.
not like I got.
And that's a good point. And just like I used, for example, the other day, like a fugue, for example, that's like a conversation. One subject enters, and then the other subject enters, and the stretto, of course, is overlapping subjects. So I use the example, imagine you having a conversation with someone, but before you can finish your thought, they cut you off and they started their own thought. So making it relevant, it's like, oh yeah, I've incorporated people's boyfriends and girlfriends, into conversations, because you have to be able to see it in the way you see it in your community. But realizing on this other side of that you cannot write those constructive responses based on the school system you teach in, because the exam is asking you based on a perfect world situation. Nobody cares you only have one clarinet in your ensemble. The exam is asking you to write as if you have a full ensemble of clarinets, that you have double reeds in your ensemble. So while we need to teach it, and like you said, make it relevant, Stephanie, so that you can vocalize to memorize. You need to be able to read it. When you can restate something in your own terms and someone else gets it, that's when you've mastered the content. So we need to focus more. And at UNCG, I had Dr. Patricia Sink. She used to focus on mastery learning. It's more about mastering the content, not how long it takes you to learn it, but we want you to master this content and be able to explain it in your own words. So you, like Jeremiah said, so you're not just doing it to pass this class because it's required, but you're doing it to have lifelong knowledge of it, and you'll never forget it. So I definitely agree. If something can't connect with me, I've forgotten it already.
And I agree. Like professors, my college, Dr. Miles said this to me. He broke down what's the difference between teaching public school, teaching high school, teaching secondary education, and even up. He said, teachers teach, instructors instruct, professors profess. When he said that, it clicked to me why in some classes, if Professor so-and-so by title on the official level, not we're just calling them prof because we Black and that's what we do when somebody gets education at a level we deem respectable. Professor so-and-so talks the entire 2 hours and you write or listen. That's not instruction. A professor professes. When we talk about degrees, undergrad is about learning what somebody wants you to know. Getting your master's degree is about developing an idea based off of what somebody told you. And then getting your doctorate is about developing your own ideas from experiences that are completely personal to you. And if you think about what's the pinnacle to get your doctorate, right? So they're going to profess to you their ideals and how they see music education, how they see music performance. And it's not from, like Dr. Brock is saying, from a perfect world scenario. My bias question or bias section is the constructive response, because there's a certain level of articulation that they are looking for in your answer. And if you come from a marginalized community, underserved populations, you got one clarinet. My first year teaching, I had one clarinet. My first year teaching, I had one tuba. I had one saxophone. Like, that is not an ensemble in the perfect world. It's a group. where you will never get to true balance and true score analysis because the parts might even be missing that you're trying to cover. If you think from a marchingband's perspective, the whole balance pyramid is completely different. And it is what it is. And it's not saying it's wrong. It's just saying that it's not reflected in that test. So that's why I caution people. I was like, if you want to get certified, like if you want to get a job and you want to make a lot of money, you're going to have to touch on the perfect world scenarios. Is it fair? No. But is it real? Yes. I want to make money. I want to make money off of teaching. I'm tired of this. I do it for the love. I do it for the culture. I do it for the craft. No, I do it to pay my mortgage on time. When are we going to move to that? I'm doing this because I expect to get adequate pay. I expect that you're going to take these degrees and you're going to pay me at least at the top tier of what you can in this field. I don't transfer unless someone's matching. I'm not transferring just because, even for peace of mind, I'm not transferring because peace of mind is my mortgage on time. That's my peace of mind.
I think those situations you were talking about, the real world situations where you don't have the dream instrumentation, those should be on the Praxis as well, because that's really what most of us are gonna get anyway. You know what I'm saying? Not too many people have the dream ensemble. Yeah.
Woo.
That's true.
It's rough out here.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
And hip hop too. I'm sorry, hip hop, R&B, rap. Just being honest. I mean, it is a part of the music culture. So, I mean, all of that needs to be on there so everybody feels successful. Like I answered something. I mean, it just seems like it's geared towards one direction. But if we put those things on there, how would that affect, you know, the other colors? And I don't think that it would affect them because they're exposed to that too, and they listen to that on a regular
and
too.
they want to know about it.
Yes, indeed. And we have to go well beyond Rapper's Delight because they feel that they're doing something for the culture. When that's the question, they'll put a listening example in as Rapper's Delight. There's more out here than Rapper's Delight. There's more out here than El DeBarge, but that's where they'll go to on the exam. They have a popular example. So yeah, it's like we're going to put this out here to satisfy the culture, but then it's still outdated to what, you know, is relevant to today's kids.
Right.
We're hip. We're playing rap.
Right.
No, you're not. I got to put this last question up because we are in the last 12 minutes. I try to cut off. I try to do a 2-hour cutoff because I know we could talk about this. We talk about this for a long time because I just got a question. Who's going to be a part of the curriculum writing task force? The reason I left that admin part of my master's degree, I only have 9 credits left to get a master's in administration. I left it because I noticed something. I had a PD at my school, and 2 women who don't look like any of us came to our school with a curriculum that they had wrote. They had quit their jobs. One was like a nurse, and the other one was something not in education, but not really like a regular like elementary school teacher. And their curriculum was based off of being intentional and transparent, which I do still use as a practice. They had enough money. I think when I looked at the budgeting for our school and how much they paid for that curriculum session, I said, that can outfit my whole band room. Y'all have money to pay for these women who don't know anything about Black and brown children coming here and do a PD on a curriculum they wrote. I said, I'm gonna write curriculum. So who's coming with me? Who's writing the new music history textbook, the new music theory textbook with culturally relevant examples? It sounds like I'm writing my thesis already. I feel like that's my project. And I've been steering that way. Who's writing the culturally relevant method books? Who's writing it? Because we know that other people are now teaching our Black and brown children, and they don't have a clue, and they're suffering too. They're sinking and suffering because That school they thought they was gonna get in HOCO, MoCo, those are affluent districts
Howard
in
County,
Maryland.
Montgomery County, Maryland.
They don't get that job. They end up sitting next to me in PD. And when it's time to talk, there's stuff like, I just can't even get them to sit down. I was like, how's that Praxis treat you now?
That's just something I was gonna talk about too. Like, I feel like, just my personal opinion, I feel like Black children learn better from Black educators. And I personally am not really pro HBCUs having a bunch of non-Black educators or non-Black and brown educators. And I feel like that's what I got the bulk of my education, especially on the music side, from non-Black educators. And they not only just taught me, but they taught the weighted courses. They taught my theory. They taught my history. They taught my tech courses. Like, those were classes I had to pass, and not only had to pass, but I had like 3 of them. So, maybe I will understand the information a little differently had my professor been a Black educator. I'm definitely going to always and forever be pro Black educator teaching Black students, because I feel like we need that to understand. Not to say we can't learn from anyone else, but we kind of relate better. We hear things differently. We say things differently to each other. I think that would, you asked me. Yeah, you asking me.
I'm gonna keep putting this in the mirror.
You asked me what do I feel like I needed. I feel like I needed somebody who looked like me to teach my hardest courses.
Come on now. And that there's somebody who looks like you who can teach those courses. That's a whole nother show. Thank you for a new topic.
Yes.
Thank you for a topic.
They have to not be afraid to push the envelope too, because it's Black on Black. Sometimes we slap on the wrist or let things slide, but no, that's where you should be the firmest on that student and not letting them slide and teaching them everything that they need to know and pushing them to go out and learn the things that they need to learn, instead of accepting the bare minimum because I'm Black too type of thing.
So I gotta move us to the last question. Here we go. And you've been dancing on it, Dr. Brock. Do you think our music programs putting too much emphasis on performing and not enough on teacher prep?
I think yes, and I think in more ways than one. But the crazy thing is, we'll put a lot of emphasis on performance, but yet our performance majors are not fully prepared when they leave the profession. They leave the profession not knowing, one, that I always say that they're self-employed. They are not prepared to go to grad school. They don't know what to expect. But then, two, not only do we put a lot of emphasis on performance, we put it on perfect performance. We're not allowing our students to make a mistake, especially on recitals and things like that, when in those mistakes come the learning, or in those mistakes come the opportunity for that music education major to analyze what went wrong. I think we're so heavily weighted on applied lessons, on ensembles that are worth 1 credit. And while we love those ensembles, I think in there, if we're going to be there for 4 and 5 hours, there needs to be some education and some practicum and some student-led sessions as well. Because I think more would get done if you let your music majors kind of get in there and, implement some of the things they're learning in those methods courses, as opposed to being led astray by, the blind leading the blind. I'm going to leave that there. But I definitely feel that there is a heavy emphasis, and it's a heavy emphasis on us just following the conservatory method instead of having a mind of our own. I think, Krystal, you said that, or someone said, why don't we have a universal curriculum when teaching this? We're so stuck on pride and tradition, but sometimes traditions need to die, especially when we're not graduating people. We're stuck on tradition of not graduating people, losing our accreditation, losing our funding. Are we stuck on that tradition? But even with our students, we put a lot of pressure on what our schools are not doing, what our professors are not doing, but we got to put it on the students too. What is your focus? What is your target when you're entering these programs? Do you want to be a music educator because you think being a band director or choir director is just waving your arms? Or do you have a goal to impact change in education? And if you don't, then you need to reassess why you're taking the major, because teaching is not a fallback. If you don't make it a performance, you can't just go teach. That's my pet peeve. Teaching is not a fallback. It is the profession of all professions. You can't have any other profession in this world unless someone taught you how to do that profession. So like Cybil said, put some respect on the educator, because it's just, I think we have a misconception that, oh, I want to do what they do, but you don't know what happens behind the scenes. So we've put a lot on the education side, not being prepared from the institution and professor perspective, but we have to also make sure that we have self accountability and that we know why we're in this game to begin with. Some people, we think it's a good game because you are all state person in high school, that, oh, I'm gonna go be a band director or a choir director or orchestra director, but then you don't like kids, you don't like to study, you don't like theory, or you can't stay out of the parties long enough to go to class. Going to class is part of the battle of passing the class. I just have to play both sides of the fence here, because we put a lot on what the test is not doing, and the test is too broad, but we missed the first 6 weeks of class. So I think it's just on both sides. But yeah, it's a heavy emphasis on performance, and I don't see that changing anytime soon unless we come together as a group. It's just not going to change, because that's our moneymaker for all of our programs.
Yeah, we need the kinfolk collective to bite it. Yeah,
I was gonna say not only emphasis, but I'll use the word too much time too. Like some ensembles, too much time for music educators to be in one location. That, just being honest, that is their time, and they do need adequate time to prepare for the things that they're preparing for as an individual. Yes, you are a part of an ensemble, but at some point you got to take responsibility on what your individual duties are to get out of this school.
That's real simple, because we've talked about this on the show before, about some of these long hours are not necessary. It's a lack of preparation and planning on the director's part that we on this field, Daddy, I'm going to say that today, marching until 10, 11, 12, and we got a recital tomorrow at 11. We got a recital at 9 a.m. and our chops are gone. Like, forget the time. I am physically worn out. I cannot play through this concerto tomorrow because we are still working through the fight. and Jeremiah hit the nail on the head. Jeremiah did something that I rarely hear happen sometimes. He said, I kind of feel like I might not have been engaged myself. That comes from that guidance that Stephanie's talking about. When you're a freshman, let's sit down and talk. Lauren, we have had this conversation. Some of our students don't need to be a music major. The advisors, I know we need the numbers up, but what good is it if they can't pass Praxis? What good is it if they can't get through the recital? Hell, what good is it if they can't get through a jury? We ain't even talking about the senior recital. You can't get through your juries. And I ain't even gonna say on Eurocentric music. I'm just saying on music. Because we had a master percussionist, God bless his soul, Shannon Cotton. He ended up being principal. He died maybe a few years ago. But he did jazz on his recital. Like, his whole thing was jazz. Like, that's what I want to do as a performance major. That's what I'm studying. Why are we not having a real conversation with our music majors? And that's not saying to discourage. That's saying, let's lay out all the things you're going to need to do up front. We do have those course things, but in the course thing, the first thing I noticed in my course catalog is it said I had to take 19 credits every semester to graduate in 4 years. That was I said, wait, the hell? I thought the limit was 18. That was the first. I'm a first generation college student too, Stephanie. And the first thing I noticed, I said, 18? And at Morgan, there is no music education degree because our state has this war with PWIs that a lawsuit has just won. Like last year, we don't have music education. So you are a double major. I kind of like it though, because it forces you to come out with a master's. in teaching. So when I came out, 5 years, 5.5, 6 years of time, I was already gonna be there 5 years. Let's not playing around and acting like 4 years of standards. It's not. 6 years, I got a master's degree. I walked in my first teaching gig making $57,000 a year. I didn't even have the grown woman weight yet. I was still marching band skin tee. Why? Because I came out with the teacher cert and the degree. So I'm okay with them not having music education because you still got to take the courses. But why aren't we laying out these criteria? Our advisors sitting down in those first semester or two and saying, you might have to take 19 credits. I graduated with 172 credits undergrad.
Wow.
And see, the thing is,
yeah, go ahead and make that face.
Look, the thing is, not even just like when you're first sitting down, when they first come in, but you have to check in on them. Like I was just kind of, what Stephanie said, I was just kind of doing my own thing. I was floating, like, oh, Lauren, she plays well. You don't have to check on her. Like, y'all didn't even ask what I wanted to do in my career, and until y'all heard my senior recital, it's like, oh, Lauren, you want to be in the orchestra? Like, well, this is all I wanted. But like, y'all have to check in with your students and provide the resources to get them to the right place. When I went to Morgan, when I started going to Morgan, people were asking me, okay, what do you want to do? Okay, so this is how you do it. And I instantly, I wanted to be an orchestra too. I didn't get that from my college in North Carolina. But as soon as I went to Morgan, I started getting gigs. And I said, I want to do this. Okay, so here's a gig here. Here's an opening for this orchestra. I'm the principal clarinetist of the Hopkins Concert Orchestra now. Like, this is all I wanted to do. And I felt like I wasted years trying to figure out what I wanted to, finding the resources and the people to help me. Like, they just cycle students in and say, okay, take these classes, pass the praxis, and graduate. They don't have the guidance through all 4 years. Like, they really need to invest in checking in with their students. I understand students are adults, but these students are more children now. They're more children than we were children when we were undergrads. So they need real guidance. And I'm not here to insult you, Stephanie, but a lot of your peers, coming out of the pandemic, like, it's just they're not it. So you have to keep checking in on them. And so it doesn't affect your dropout rate, people, or your change of major rate. You have to invest time in your students, and the advisors need to do a better job of just checking in, sitting down and having that conversation in the middle to see if this is working out or not.
And I'm going to say they are it. They just haven't been shown how to be the best it they can be. And it's proof. My school got some struggles. Well, Gen Pop, we ain't going to talk about why I call one part of my school Gen Pop. In DEF Fine Arts Jim Henson program, we have the highest graduation rate. But the reason why is because there's so many hands on them. When you got 8 music teachers and everybody's kind of tag teaming at you, like I sat in the band rehearsal today, and the band director, the VPA band director, because we have several positions, like it is a school of music. So, those of you who somebody threw some shade, said, are you a band director? Listen, where I'm at is on a pinnacle that you can't even imagine. When Black and brown kids, we call them the Hogwarts can outplay most kids in a university band right now. Like, I'm not even kidding. It's not me boasting. But they have so many hands on them, like Stephanie said. There's so that the group, the village is on them like this. One question in theory class transfers to your ensemble class. One question in your ensemble class cycles back. This is how it should be in college. Why the private instructor don't talk to the band director? Why the band director doesn't talk to the music history teacher? I know I felt like I was getting tag teamed by that music department at some point at Morgan. I was like, well, damn, I just love music history. Why are you asking me this? Why are you asking me where's this composer from? Why are you asking me the dates? And I'm just trying to get this run right. Why you asking me why Shostakovich 5 is nationalistic music and we in band practice? But I'm glad it happened because that's also what you see on the test.
I will say I wish I had an experience like that. I have been told by a professor that basically we got babied, and I came to college 2018. So this is my 5th year, but they basically said, we need everything spoon fed to us, and I think the generational gaps in who's our educators and where we are, because I guess it was a heavy emphasis on independence, and I get, what I'm saying, we like 18 or 23, so you're growing up, but why wouldn't you want to? I'm not asking you to literally help me like guide my hand every step of the way. But the least you can do is offer me guidance. And from conversations that I've had, and I could be wrong, please correct me if I'm wrong, but from conversations that I had about this topic, at HBCUs, it's not like that. Especially in HBCUs in the music side. I'm not gonna say throw you to the wolves, but you kind of have to just jump into the deep end and then figure out if you can swim or not. Where if I have peers that go to PWIs, sorry, that's the name of my choir. PWIs, and they get that hand holding. They get someone who's like, this is what you have to do. And then like a couple weeks later, they check on them and then they hold them accountable. Whereas now it's like, it's just tough love, but it's after the fact. You know what I'm saying? Like we kind of need someone to hold us accountable in a way that we want to hold ourselves accountable. Like that's what we need. And I don't feel like that's something that we get. And that's
yeah. But the PWIs are struggling too. And I see that because I'm starting to get those clients now too. They just do a pretty good job of hiding it. But they're having some of the same struggles, and some of them feel like they're not getting the guidance they need either. So this conversation is becoming too common across the country right now. And it's definitely time to take action.
I think humility is important too. Mm-hmm. I was saying humility, like if I don't know something as a professor, then I need to go and find out from another professor so that I can accommodate that student or answer that student's question instead of just being like, oh no, you go find out. That's something you need to try to find out. Try to make it look like I know, but I'm not getting ready to tell you. You know what I'm saying? Saving space, if you will.
Yeah. And that's real. Like I like to operate from I'm going to give you all the resources. When you choose not to use it, that's when the hammer's coming down.
Right.
I'm going to give you every resource that I can. And that there's a lot of, I feel like I do a lot of hand holder. That's a lot different at my PWI than when I was undergrad or even grad school. Even in a PWI grad school, I do feel like the closer the professors are to, I won't say to the age of the students, but there isn't like a whole, 40-year gap. Because if we're honest with ourselves, those professors weren't always effective with us either when we were in school. Mm-hmm. They weren't effective. Times change, teaching methods change, teaching practices change. And, they just kind of wasn't, they wasn't always effective. Their way didn't always work. That do as I say, and don't question why doesn't really work for modern day education. They need to know why. The transparency needs to be there. Even sometimes I have to be transparent with my high school students, and I'll say this is on the test. The end. Mm-hmm. I don't control the test, but I can control what you know. Mm-hmm. And I can help you know more. So Stephanie, I'm telling you, you breaking my heart, you and Jeremiah, and I know that story is more and more that is across, and it's not just Black kids. It's not just Black kids at all. Money tends to hide a thing. And we know that our Black schools are underfunded, and we know that our professors at our Black universities are underpaid. Mm-hmm. The more. And we know we don't have the most update facilities because there's whole kinds of landlocked situations back when they couldn't expand. There's university of this state systems that if your school isn't in it, they're not in the cool kid club. So they can't decide what they want without asking. I call it the oracle, They can't ask the triple entente of university schools of this state here to add a course. That's Maryland. Our HBCUs can't add a course without consorting with University of Maryland system. And I work for the University of Maryland system. If you want to add a course, it has to be voted upon and agreed. And that's why we keep getting lawsuits. So, I say sue on until you get what you want, y'all. There's a question in chat, and we about to end. Do you believe or know that female directors, especially those that are mothers, more hands-on with the development of their students? Yeah. It's an extension of our households and the strong Black women. If we're going to say Black and brown mothers that we saw carrying a lot of loads and still being able to make time for the baby on a podcast, like that's needed. But we are, what are we, 1% of the tenure professors? We're 1%.
1 to 3, yes.
1 to 3%. And guess what? The data for Black professors, Black women professors, it's 0.1. We're not even 1%. Like,
Right.
So I thank y'all for coming on this. Like, I have to adjudicate in the sticks tomorrow morning. I'm gonna come and I'm gonna look like this, and I promise you, the district where I'm going, they may have never seen a me. I need the Stephanies to be not the first time they've seen a Stephanie. I need the Laurens not to be the first time they've seen a Lauren. I don't need Professor Cybil Haskins to be the first time and only time that students at a HBCU may have seen a Black woman professor. I don't want to see a Dr. Tamisha Price Brock, the only person heading and president of a large organization, for time out for the only one. Like, for real, we all got to put our heads together. And the only way, Dr. Brock, the only way it's going to happen if we put together the team. The team has to do it.
And the time is now. The time is now.
Time is now.
Yeah. So we're ready. We'll get it going.
So I'm gonna end on this note. I don't know if y'all want to have a part 2, but I just want to say thank you, Dr. Tamisha Price Brock, for sharing information and sharing information free with people who look like us, but still patron her. If you can't pass that test, if you're struggling, this the one. The best one I know. We're gonna support it. Stephanie, please email your information. Okay? We wanna be that circle. Lauren, keep passing theory the first time without a failing score. As a Black person. Cybil, keep being the badass that you are at your alma mater, giving back so more Stephanies can be the next whoever. I love it. I love y'all. Thank you. I thank y'all. Thank you so much.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Good night.